Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today's video, we are doing something really exciting. I asked you guys to send in your sustainable fashion questions and I said I would answer them, and that's what's happening today. I got quite a lot of questions, actually, a bit more than I was expecting. So I'm going to split this video into two parts and hopefully get to everyone's questions, but I'm hoping there's not going to have to be a third part, but maybe if you guys keep sending them in, then I can make this a recurring thing. But yeah, I'm really excited to go through them today. So let's just get started. Okay, number one, what are your top tips for avoiding mindless shopping when you're bored? I get this question a lot actually, and I think I've covered it a little bit in another video or another couple of videos. But the top answer that I give every time is to unsubscribe from people that are pushing you to shop. So unsubscribing from brands or unsubscribing from influencers who are paid by brands to push you stuff will just almost instantly take away that impulse to shop when you're on your phone late at night and you're bored and you're scrolling and you add something to basket which you don't need. I think I spoke about how social media can be so powerful in getting us to buy something even when we don't want to shop. And I think removing that temptation by unfollowing influencers who are pushing you to buy, unfollowing brands who are doing the same thing, but also from just trying to find hobbies outside of your phone, I found was really effective to me. So I've always been a big reader, but I think most people, when I got older, I kind of dropped the habit a little bit more. But in the past few years, I've been really getting back into reading because I try not to go on my phone too much in the evenings. So yeah, that's really helped me. Or there's 1,000 other hobbies you can do if you're not a reader. But just literally getting off your phone, getting off doom scrolling as well has been really good for my mental health. Also, when I try to avoid impulse buying, which I think is what this is when you're just on your phone scrolling and you just want to, get that serotonin hit by buying something, I add something to a list if I think I want it, and then I wait at least 2 weeks, if not a month. And I have to be really honest with myself and ask if I've thought about that purchase in that time frame, or whether I didn't think about it at all and didn't dream about it. Because when I want something, I want it, and I start thinking about it so much and I get a bit obsessed. And if I don't feel like that for an item, I know it's a foolproof way of knowing whether it was an impulse buy or not. So that could help you. Also guys, if you have an answer to one of these questions and you don't think I've covered something, but you have a really good top tip for that last question, for instance, definitely pop it down below and we can all help each other. I'm trying to build a little community here of sustainable fashion enthusiasts. So subscribe if you're watching this too and you like the video. Next. If you're buying a new clothing item in an end of season sale, is that not sustainable as you're saving it from ending up in landfill? This is a good question, actually, and I completely see your point here. But I have previously spoken about how fashion's production models work and how they build this overflow into their business model, knowing that they're going to have to discount stuff and knowing that certain people will buy that discounted stuff. It's all kind of factored into the margins. So on the whole, no, I would say it's not really sustainable, with kind of caveats. I mean, if you're buying something just because it's in the sale, then that's never going to be sustainable, because you're impulse buying because you think something's a good deal and not because you're thinking about the purchase and you've previously thought about the purchase. If you really wanted something beforehand and then you wait until it's in the sale and purchase it then, that's sustainable, that's smart. I do that all the time. It's a really nuanced question, and obviously you want to save clothes from going into landfill, but a lot of brands also have other methods into place. They know that they can't sell everything and they will do something else with that clothing before it hits landfill. So they might donate it to a secondhand clothing store, for example. I know there's a couple of brands now that have partnerships with specific stores, like Royal Trinity Hospice, which is really big in London. I think has a partnership with Zara, because I see first-hand Zara in my charity stores all the time. So they know that if it doesn't sell in their end of season sale, they can sell it on to secondhand stores for a little bit. And then I think it's okay to purchase it then. That's sustainable, because really secondhand stores are the last port of call before a landfill. But I'm always wary about giving brands money, especially when I know that it's going to further their overproduction models. It's a very nuanced subject, but in general, I'd say no. What are your thoughts on no buy years or months, and have you tried them? Not buying anything is obviously the most sustainable choice, but it feels like I'm sacrificing my main creative outlet, my clothing. I've started to do no buy months this year. So I did one February because I realized I hadn't bought anything halfway through the month anyway, and I might as well try it. And I enjoyed it so much that I decided to do it every other month of the year now. So I'm in my no buy month this month. And I did enjoy it last month, like the last time I did it. This month I'm struggling a little bit. I think it really depends on what a no buy month means to you and what you do to adapt it to your lifestyle, I guess. So a no buy month for someone could mean absolutely no purchases. For another person, it could mean no first-hand purchasing, but second-hand purchasing is okay. For another person, it could mean no fashion items, but other kind of luxuries are okay. So definitely tailor it to you, because even just cutting down on one kind of overconsumption in your life is good for the environment, and it might ease you into it. I'm always a fan of easing into a habit rather than going cold turkey. But also, I don't think it's really stifling for creativity. I find that I wear my clothes a lot more when I'm not buying anything. You're kind of forced to wear your old clothes more and reimagine them in new ways, and that's really exciting. Next question. Thoughts on purchasing vintage and secondhand leather / suede? Also, how most vegan leather is just made of plastic, which is arguably just as bad as the real thing, and real leather would last longer. Let's split that up into two. So thoughts on purchasing vintage or secondhand leather items. I think buying secondhand or vintage items is always fine. It's always a good idea. Like, if you're going to buy something anyway and you think you can buy it secondhand, always do that. That's the more sustainable way. I think it's a little bit more complicated when it comes to the vegan or like plastic leather versus real leather debate. And I think we have this debate a lot on my channel, and I'm always of the same mindset that it's really not black and white. I know a lot of people come at it with the argument that vegan leather is a byproduct of the meat industry, but it's not. I mean, it's obviously something that comes from raising meat, but farmers get paid, I think on average, a lot more for the skin of an animal than the meat of an animal, and that is a massive incentive for them to raise more cattle and all the methane and pollution that comes with that, because they know they can sell the skin and the meat can kind of be the subsidy in a way. Obviously it's really dependent on the farmer and the country and whatever, but it's not always black and white, as leather is a byproduct. When it comes to plastic fashion, however, obviously that's not good for the planet. We don't want to be producing more plastic. There's progress coming every day, but right now I do think it is more susceptible to wear and tear, I believe. I'm just thinking, because I bought the most gorgeous Ghani boo bag and I love it, and that's the last leather item I bought. I think the way I got around this was actually buying this bag because it was recycled leather. So I didn't have to go through the real leather versus plastic leather debate, because recycled leather is obviously a sustainable option in the way that the leather's already been created and then broken back down and recreated into something, so it's circular. I do think it has some plastic in it, and I reasoned with myself that that was okay because it would probably increase the durability, or there was probably like limits with the process of binding recycled leather at the time, so I kind of accepted that I had to have a bit of plastic in it. Honestly, maybe I just need to do a whole video on like sustainable material myths and debunking it and talking about all the different kind of arguments for and against and letting people decide. I think you have to decide for yourself, because obviously there's the ethical implications of carrying around leather. I'm a vegetarian, but I reasoned with myself when I bought the Garni bag that it was recycled leather. I hadn't killed any animals. So if in doubt, buy something secondhand. If you don't want to buy something plastic, then go for real leather. If you don't want to buy something real leather because of the ethics of it, buy plastic, but don't overbuy. As long as we're not overbuying, then we're kind of doing what we can to help the issue, and it's then on brands to do more. Okay, how do you trust and know when a brand is really sustainable or greenwashing? This is a hard question. This is nuanced. So I think actually there's a question I should answer here first, which is, this must seem silly, but what does the term greenwashing mean? I need Sustainable Fashion 101. First off, no silly questions. Greenwashing is when brands try to trick us into thinking something is more sustainable than it is because they're using it for marketing purposes, trying to get us to buy something new and preying on our beliefs that it will be better for the planet when it's not. So a really good example is recycling schemes in store for some fast fashion brands. So like H&M have a recycling scheme where you can bring in old clothes, which are not necessarily limited to H&M, and leave them in store, and you get a voucher for new purchases on H&M. That's greenwashing, because not only is that clothing that you've just donated most likely destined for landfill, they're also incentivizing you to buy more with those donations you've just given. So it's literally overconsumption and pollution in the same thing. But because of the way brands frame it, you might think that you're doing something sustainable. Going back to the other question, how do you know and trust when a store is really sustainable or greenwashing? Honestly, the more you involve yourself in sustainable fashion, you can just tell. You just get a vibe. But like, in general, I guess, if brands are constantly promoting new products, like they're bringing out something every day, then they're perpetuating overconsumption. If they're jumping on trends, like say, I was on Twitter the other day complaining about the fact that Miu Miu, which is a luxury brand, has brought out a cowboy hat to fit in with Beyonce Summer. Like, Miu Miu is not a Western brand. They have no business bringing out a cowboy hat, but they know people are interested in the Western trend because of Beyonce's album, and they're trying to capitalize on that. And I guess that's just an instant red flag to me. Again, if they have a lot of sales, or if they have like constant discount codes, or, you know, just pushing you to buy, and you feel like when you see their content, they're always pushing you to buy something new, that's a red flag. I'm sure a lot of people have like different ways they can tell. So this would be a really good one to drop your own comments in. But what I tend to do is do a little bit of research. Unfortunately, when I find a brand that I want to shop from, I'll go direct to the website's page and check out their responsibility pages and kind of judge for myself whether they talk about supply chains and labor rights and what materials they use and all these things. But there are websites that do this for you if you're not as sure. So websites like Good On You do a brand directory where they rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, which can be a little bit arbitrary. And they also do promote consumption, and they have affiliate links. So it's not foolproof, but it's definitely a place to start. And then as you become more confident and you learn more, you'll be able to like know yourself instantly. What is your favorite fashion myth that you love to debunk? Okay. I think what we just touched on, which is about secondhand fashion. So I know everyone always says, and I've said probably a couple of times without context, that it's always more sustainable to shop secondhand, and secondhand shopping is sustainable, but it is all about your intentions. Like if you're using secondhand shopping as a replacement for fast fashion overconsumption, like you're constantly buying new secondhand items and constantly like revolving your wardrobe using secondhand items, that's not sustainable. You need to have an attitude shift to be part of the sustainable fashion world. Do you know what I mean? Like it should all be about conscious shopping, and secondhand fashion is more a tool to this than like a direct like port. Does that make sense? It's almost like the car that gets you there rather than the destination. I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe I'll have to explain that more if someone comes back and says like, what? But anyway, on to the next one. Are there any brands you fully trust that are more accessible in price for the average person that are sustainable? You're asking the tough questions, honestly. I've done a couple of videos on this. One is coming out, I think by this time this video airs, it's coming out the same weekend as this video, whether I do this video first or the other one, which is going to be about like fun, sustainable brands. But in all, I think the idea of accessible pricing is so personal that it's really hard to talk about it. Because I only shop a couple of items firsthand, direct from brands, I'm willing to spend a little bit more. So what I see as accessible for like a top or something like that is maybe like spending, I don't know, 40 quid or something on a really good quality top, because this is like one of only 5 purchases in the year I save for this purchase and I want it to last me. But I know that that's like probably really high for some people, especially people that are coming from fast fashion that, you know, can get 10 tops for £40. I think it's really hard, but I don't want to give a list of like what I think is accessible because it's so personal. What I'd say is like, if in doubt, buy something secondhand. That if you're looking for something specific, buy it secondhand or vintage. And yeah, I'm sorry, I feel like I haven't really answered this question, but I feel like I can't. So sorry. What made you interested in this topic if you haven't discussed it in detail, and what drove you to make a channel about it? I've always loved fashion, but since I was in university like 6 years ago, I felt like I couldn't talk about fashion without talking about sustainability, I guess. Like talking about fashion without talking about the future of fashion felt really obsolete and kind of pointless to me. So I guess sustainability was always going to be the way that fashion has to go, one way or another. We can't carry on like this. So it made sense to me to start, you know, researching that world. And then as I started researching it, I just fell in love with it. I think although it's complex, it's so interesting. And I think the people in sustainable fashion are so interesting. And now I'm in it, I can never go back. I did used to shop fast fashion in uni, like first year of uni. And I was, you know, shopping from your typical Zara, Boohoo, Misguided and stuff. And the quality was just so bad, and I never felt like I actually had anything to wear. So like, I guess that was another push for me. It was just like, I was reflecting on what I had in my wardrobe and just not being happy with it. And I guess that was enough for me to just say something has to change. And then looking into how the industry needed to change too, it just kind of came together. But because I studied journalism in uni, I was really interested in covering fashion, and a lot of my projects were tailored towards sustainable fashion. Like my last year dissertation project was a sustainable fashion magazine, and I got to interview some really cool people. I then got a job at a sustainable fashion brand out of uni and did their like comms and marketing for a little bit, which was a really good way to learn the industry. And then kind of whilst I was doing that and back at uni, I was working freelance with some brands on sustainable fashion comms again. And yeah, when I left my job, I decided to do that. And then I kind of accidentally got on TikTok talking about this subject and really enjoyed that. And yeah, my social media kind of went from there. Like I went from TikTok to Instagram to YouTube. And now here we are, where I'm mostly doing YouTube. But yeah. Okay, last question. How sustainable is online thrifting, for example, Vinted? If I buy something from a really far away country, with that travel, a lot of emissions are released. Is that bad? Should I stop thrifting online and only do it in person? There's a second part to this question, which I'll come on to. But if your two options are buying something firsthand or buying something secondhand from a little bit further away, I'd still say it's more sustainable to shop secondhand, because yes, you've got the travel emissions of that secondhand item to consider, but with firsthand, you've got the production pollution of that item and also the travel emissions from it traveling all the way around the world in its supply chain. Like an item travels thousands of miles before it gets to the store it's gonna be sold from or the consumer if you buy direct online. So you're gonna have those travel emissions either way, unfortunately, if you're thinking about secondhand versus firsthand. If you're talking specifically about shopping locally versus online, I think that's, again, a really personal thing. Like, I don't buy a lot of things overseas, but I live in London, I guess, where I have a lot of in real life thrift stores around me, and a lot of people in London sell their clothes constantly, so I never really have to outsource my clothes from too far away. But if you're living in like Siberia, I can see why you might need to import some clothes. So it's not only personal, but it's also about your personal reasoning here. I can't give you like a definite answer. You have to apply it to your situation and judge for yourself, I guess. You'll know whether it is sustainable or not based on the fact that if you need this clothing, then you need this clothing. If you don't need this clothing and you're over consuming, then no, it's not going to be sustainable whether you buy it locally or whether you get it imported. So yeah, it's kind of up to you to set yourself into one camp or the other, I guess. But maybe what you could do is try limit your big purchases. Like, say there's something you really want and you can't get it locally, then treat yourself, but try shop locally most of the time. Second part of this question, with Vinted, people often send the item in a paper bag wrapped fully in tape, making it not recyclable. Isn't that adding to the thesis that Vinted is not as environmentally friendly as we're made to believe? Most purchases I've made, I've ended up having to throw away the packaging, unfortunately. I think this is kind of, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny. I stumbled across this Twitter account the other day, which was like Depop drama or something. And they had a whole post dedicated to like the worst packaging people had received their clothes in, which made me really laugh. But I think what's happening here is most people are sending their secondhand clothing in secondhand packaging. Like, I know if I have to buy something, I'll keep that packaging, pop it in a cupboard, and then when someone buys something from my Depop, I'll send it on in that packaging. So that in itself is sustainable because you're reusing something, but obviously you have to make sure that item is secure, and probably you rip the packaging when you opened it. So I see why you have to use a lot of tape. I think it is more sustainable to use a little bit more tape and therefore reuse packaging than it would be to buy new packaging and use a tiny bit of tape. So as long as you're not going overboard for no reason on the tape, I know you probably have to throw it away, but it would have been thrown away anyway. At least it got one more use, if that makes sense, before it was thrown away, or hopefully recycled if you can recycle it. But anyway, I think that's part 2. This has gone on a little bit longer than I expected, so I'm glad I split the video. And I will be releasing the part 2 maybe next week. So subscribe and make sure you're watching out for that. Thank you so much for watching though, and I will speak to you really soon. Bye.